Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to Think Theo Season 5. And Allison is our guest today, Allison Ferrier, and she is from New York City. And she was my very first guest on Season 1 when I very first started my podcast. And at that time, it was called Smilecast. And then it changed just to my brand, Think Theo Podcast, where we talk about grief and the many complications surrounding grief. And when I had first talked to Allison, and I think it was 2020. She still had both of her parents, and I still had my dad. So we only had lost my mom at that point. And since that time, I have lost my dad, and Allison has lost her mom and her dad. So that's probably where we're going to focus most of our space today is in losing your parents. So Allison, oh, and Manly's here. Everybody, Manly's always here, my dog. Everybody, welcome Allison to Think Theo podcast live from Connecticut, actually.
Yes. Thank you for having me, old friend.
I know
Great
it.
to be back. As you said, lots has changed in the 5 years since we started your podcast and COVID, and we were talking a lot about new normal. And but yeah, still plugging away as an educator, moving towards retirement. Out here in the Connecticut area, I teach in about an hour, 45 minutes north of New York City. And yeah, just sitting in a lot of all of the different emotions of, I guess it's midlife awakening, midlife crisis, all of it.
Let's just call it a crisis. But for those of you that don't know, Allison's mom and my dad grew up in the same community here in North Central Texas. And Allison's grandmother lived about half a mile from our farm, not even. And so every summer, Allison and her mom and dad that lived in New York and her sister Amal, they would come to Texas for a little summer vacation. So I was always so excited when mom and daddy would say, Allison and Mel are coming. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And we'd be like, can we come over, go get the landline phone and call? And I remember it would ring and I would think, oh, I hope it's Allison and Mel and they can come over. And we played and rode a go-kart around that Bethel community. And we lived in a little spot there in Texas. Our farm was in the Bethel community. And Allison, ironically, now lives in Bethel, Connecticut.
Yep.
Crazy.
Talk about synchronicity, I guess. Bethel is something, and I need to look it up more, but I know Bethel is like Bethel from Judaism, which means like something. I know there's a
People,
deeper meaning to it.
it means people of God. So Daddy
People of
named
God.
our
That's
church the Bethel Bible Church because it was the people of God, the Word of God, and church is the house of God.
wow.
Yeah. And so, Allison, what has happened with you since we last? I know that we lost Daddy, my dad, to suicide and taking his life. And then it wasn't very long after that that your mom started to decline. So do you want to just kind of walk us through like your grief journey and what's happened and tell us how that came to be?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Around the year of COVID, there was a lot of pre-grieving going on because my mother, who had had dementia, it was becoming more obvious that she was still living in a condo with my dad, and not too far from me, about 5 to 6 miles from here. And they were very active in my life. Coming to I have 3 children. As you know, they're um, coming to games, baseball games, basketball, soccer for the kids. So
Even
my
came to
life,
even came to Texas.
yes, we came down to Texas right before like lockdown, and then we had come down in 2021, I guess, with my dad too. Even though at that point we had moved towards an assisted living for my mom, who was my dad just being unable to care for her in the home anymore. So I guess the grief journey started with pre-grieving all the things that I'd hoped that my um I got this respite period of these 5 or 6 years where my mom's mental, she had also had some I call brain health issues. Dr. Daniel Amen says we need to reframe mental illness and call it brain health because it's taking care of our brain, and there's
I
such a
love that. I
yeah.
love that.
So anyway, dealing with that, and then her being in this really good place for 5 years, I got the spit period, thankfully getting close to my mom again before she slowly was a little, there was slippage away. In that year, or she was in assisted living 2021 and 2022, and we'd visit her 2 or sometimes 3 times a week, usually twice. My dad was over there pretty much 3 to 4, sometimes 5 times a week, because again, they were so enmeshed. And I found myself grappling with loss of control. I've learned through, I'm also in Al Anon, through this idea of accepting what is in front of us and how to let go, right? What can I control and what I can't? What can I
Right.
do? I can tell my mom I love her anytime I'm there, even though I might, she still recognized us and we were still actively going over. We played music with her. Um, and that took us to, March of 2023. And within 2 to 3 months, there was a slow decline where hospice, they suggested maybe we consider having hospice services come in, which I didn't even know could happen while someone was in assisted living. And they did. They started some hospice with her that January. And by March, I guess, again, people who work in assisted living know when someone's slowly declining, and to give you signs of starting to prepare. They called us middle of March and said there's been some acute changes where she's not eating anymore, and is wanting to sleep a little bit more, less wanting to be in the area with the dining room. And so we had a period of about 6 to 7 days where hospice came in even more and explained the changes that we should expect. And we got to, in a beautiful way, which again, such a gift not everyone gets. We had the ability to say goodbye to my mom, and that involved bringing the kids over. I wrote her a gratitude letter. I read that to her, even though she was mostly sleeping on and off those last 5 or 6 days, and then and getting to say goodbye. I wasn't there when she took her last breath, but I had wanted to be. I guess I envisioned that. But after reading a lot after all of this loss, some people kind of maybe won't go if you're there. It's too hard. It's too
Ah,
hard to be tethered. We kind of tether them here with our love. So I think it was meant to be that my dad and I were not there that evening. I have a sister, as you said, my sister Jennifer Mal, who's in Chicago, and she was able to have flown out and spend 3 or 4 days before mom passed, and said her goodbyes. And then, March 29th of 2023, I got the call from hospice that they'd gone in between 4 and 5. She was still breathing at 5. So such began the process of processing loss of a mother, and also the pre-grief and the loss of the things I'd had with both mental illness, brain health issues, in the 12 years or so as before this, as well as um, the process of just, I don't know, finding out who I was without a mom on the earth. We're connected to our mothers, right? In utero. And there's this tether that I don't think is broken. But as your book talks about, and I had read another book called Signs, The Secret Language of the Universe.
and you gave me a copy of that one. I have not.
I did. So I am a believer. Very spiritual, that energy and love never dies. So while mom was declining, I had asked her for a sign, ironically, not ironically, because she's from Texas and I was born there, of armadillo. And that night and 4 nights after, I got, I got armadillo signs. Like, who even says armadillo all that often? And I guess maybe more if you live in Texas, but
I was going to say, where you're from, they don't say it very often. Where we're
no, I'm
saying it
impressed
when we
even.
drive down the road. There's an armadillo.
Yeah, they're not very smart creatures. They often are roadkill because they ball up and then jump right to where a bumper is if they see a car. Poor creatures, poor guys. But
Well,
there is and
let
then,
me,
as you know, we had that silly armadillo story where we would impersonate armadillos as
when
a
we were
child. So that
little.
had popped up to ask her, and I got that night. My daughter came home, who was in fifth grade at the time, or sixth grade, and she said, my teacher read us a story. There was a talking armadillo in it. And I emailed the teacher. I'm like, oh my God, an armadillo. And then the next day, a friend was listening to a podcast about asking questions with your children, and it talked about anteaters and armadillos. And the day after that, my friend was at the Boston Children's Museum, and they had a touch a pet animal, and it was an armadillo. So like
Ah,
these, you know, and through people that I love, who I had, you know, I had told in confidence, like this is the sign I'm looking for. So uh, it just kind of reaffirmed my mom still being with me. Um, you know, I also, in the time since she passed, and even before she had passed, I had been to see a medium. So I had some curiosity with that about asking, you know, asking about that and the communication. So that's not for everybody. And I don't even know that I wholly subscribe, but I do believe we should, I think, do things that make us feel still connected to our loved ones. So,
yeah. So
um,
when your mom passed and when you were grieving her, how did your role as a daughter with your dad change? I'm interested to know, or how did it intensify, or just what kind of happened? Because I know, and what happened with me is I started to, my role as a daughter changed a little bit. So tell me about that with your dad.
yeah, a lot of, I've had some interesting conversations with my sister about how we both process this grief. And because we were both so close to our parents, but I, in proximity wise, had always, I never really left the nest. I think I've, and now that dad is gone too, I have never fully cut the cord, you know, metaphorically and literally. And my sister was far more independent in that she had moved to Chicago in around 2001 or 2002. And I've all my life was so enmeshed with my parents. They cared for my each of my three kids 2 to 3 days a week when they were, you know, infants up to age 1, 1.5. So I will say that perhaps in an unhealthy way, although it was just nature of how things happened because I lived close, my dad began to rely on me and I on him for things. In ways that probably enmeshed us a little too much. So while the acute grief for my dad is gone, I am still dealing with this. Who am I as an adult? Because I don't know that I ever fully was an adult because I was so close to them. But in terms of just dad and that mutual reliance on each other, you know, I was the boots on the ground that had to go over if he fell. Like when he started to decline, there were several falls. I, you know, 5 a.m. I was going over there. You're going to be okay, Dad. And um, you know, even prior to mom passing, you know, I would often meet him at the assisted living and we'd talk about her progress. Or she fell, I'd have to go over and he'd rely on me to say, do we or do we not take her to the hospital, which was always bad for my mom because she'd get that hospital delirium and she couldn't get back to baseline easily. Um, so there was a lot of reliance. I guess that's the word that really pops up. Um,
And
you know, and so
trust.
much.
Y'all both trusted each other the most.
There is definitely a very, very deep trust, and there was also, um, I'm sure as you saw, right, when our parents begin to slip mentally, emotionally, in any way, the roles switch in some
Yeah.
ways. So I would have to be, or my sister was great too because she, even though she wasn't proximity wise here, she was not working at the time and would take phone calls to help with conferencing about dad's appointments and being on the phone because as you know we want someone to take notes and be able to refer back to what the doctors say as we age. Even, you know, when I go in now and I'm tense, right, it's you can't take all that information in. So there was a lot more of that happening, a lot more of um just making sure he was eating well. At one point we even considered doing Meals on Wheels because I didn't know if he was eating healthily enough, and so and then trying to take him over to the a senior center and say, hey, can we encourage, you know, doing these kind of projects? So it became more of a cheerleader rooting on enmeshed um,
Reversal. It was you as
reversal.
the parent and them as the child is what I had found. It sounds like what you're describing. We
Yes,
we that have lost our parents, we immediately, if we've lost, I'm sorry, we've lost one parent, we immediately feel like we have to be the big protector and cheerleader of the other parent. And
yes,
maybe sometimes that's not the case, like you're saying. Maybe we step in too hard. Maybe we need to stop and just kind of see where everything's at instead of just, I do a knee jerk reaction on most things. And with daddy, it was a knee jerk reaction to become his caregiver. And that sounds kind of like what you stepped into. When looking back now, we might could have went about that a little slower or a different way.
Yeah. Always in retrospect, you can see too. I remember even writing my dad a letter because, especially when I started to see my mother decline, I was so into this. I had just really had a problem, I think, letting go of the vision I had of the way we had interacted in those. They had moved to Chicago briefly and then back to Connecticut to be near us. And those 5 or 6 honeymoon years where they were back here and mom's mental health was good. Um, when she started to slip, I was digging into trying to hold on to so much of this vision I still had of our interactions. And um, I remember writing a letter even saying, Dad, I don't feel as close to you. I know I'm trying to, I realized I'm being controlling. I want to give you the dignity of making decisions and being involved. Please know that I'm trying to pull back a little. Sometimes those things happen a little better in letters and going back to that. I don't I don't think I handled, I didn't I tried to give him the grace of making these decisions, but there'd be times he'd say, Allie, well, once or twice he called and he'd say, I don't think I took my medication right. I don't remember where I am right now. And so there is this need to help and there's this need to almost parent in a way, but there's also
Yeah.
a space for trying to hold them and give them the dignity and grace of making decisions. So,
And
gosh,
tell
we
me
went through
about,
a lot of those factors. Should he move in with us? Should we do? And then we even talked about, could my mom was declining, could dad live with me, and maybe my mom go out to my sister. So you go through all of the caretaking. Could this work? Could this work? Um, and then ultimately, kind of also looking back, I was like, oh, some of the decline in my dad, had I researched more and been more aware, we probably could have afforded with some of the money he'd saved to have him be in home and have full-time care. And at the time, we just made this after he fell, we made this quick decision where my sister flew out here. This was again, he passed in March of 2024, a little over a year ago. But this 1 month of decline, we made these. Well, my sister will fly out and then she wasn't working. So let's try a respite assisted living there. She can visit him more often. And that's when the decline started. He got pneumonia, flu, then pneumonia. And then we hadn't got him a medical flight back and a caregiver for about 4 days. And then he was able to pass in his own condo here back in Connecticut where he felt comfortable. So there was, you look back and you can always see, I think having these conversations, I think for people who are in the thick of the pre-grieving or aging parents can say, "Oh, I didn't even." I mean, I literally looked at what the hourly rate was for like in-home care. I'm like, "Oh, well, times that times 24, we can't afford that." It isn't. That's not how it works. So had I
yeah,
known, or just hearing something on a podcast like this, you're like, "Oh, all these assumptions I had about the care we could have maybe
like
looked
you
into."
like you said a minute ago, you didn't know that hospice would come while they're in assisted living.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah, I
knowledge
just
there.
always imagine that you have to go to the hospice facility. I didn't you don't know until when you're in it. And then
Right.
you're in it, it is so much of the react versus pause. Let's just think this through. Let's collect our data, do a little praying maybe, and then circle back so we can respond instead of
Um,
react. But
right. So tell me and the people out there a little bit. We don't want to spend too much time because we won't have enough time. A little bit about your mom and dad and how they met and where he's from, which is now half where you're from, and talk about that and do that. I love when you impersonate your dad. It's so funny and cute. I want to hear that again. And then we'll go into your memoir that you wrote with your dad that you haven't published yet. So I'm holding you accountable now.
yeah, accountability partner. Thank you, friend. Yeah, they both had accents. Mom is from Texas. Dad was from north of Beirut, Lebanon. He was born and raised there, and did a year of studying here in the United States in Salt Lake City, Utah, for the AFS American Field Service. Um, Program where they do an exchange program. So he came here his senior year, but was back working at Pan American Airlines in Lebanon. And my mom, again, talk about fate and things, synchronicity coming together. She came from that little town, Cleburne, Texas, not far from you. And decided she wanted to go out and see the world. So she signed up to be trained in Washington, D.C., and worked at the State Department as a secretary in the mid 60s. And then was asked to be stationed abroad. And so she's like, "Oh, I actually found the letter in Gaga's house, my grandmother's house in Texas, where she wrote, um, been going through all mementos and stuff. She wrote to her grandfather who lived at the Allison farm, built in 1901 or two. She said, I think I'm going to be stationed in, I thought I'd be in Paris, France, but I found out I'm actually going to the Middle East, to Beirut, Lebanon. I think there's going to be great adventures coming my way." And that was like literally mailed the week before she was transferred to Beirut. And then, subsequently at an embassy party, met my father.
You
He worked
should
for Pan
frame that.
American.
You should
I
frame
know the
that.
letter.
Put
It's the
put all
history.
your pictures underneath it.
Absolutely. It's the history of how, she came to that great. Yeah, she did have an adventure. She fell in love. She got married over there. They were at an embassy party where she was the secretary, and he worked for as a Pan American Airlines delegate to help like diplomats get flights overseas. Apparently, she went up to him and said, "Is that Paco Rabanne cologne you're wearing?" And he's like, "Yes, well, it is." And then, then they asked her to dance, and they exchanged information, and yeah, the rest is history. They met there, and like 1968, they were married there in 1969. And then my dad was starting a business with handbag manufacturing, and was New York City is the fashion capital of the world, so he was here in the New York area on and off, and then we moved just north of New York City in the mid 1970s. So, but they're again, faded. He even wrote in his we have all these letters. He wrote in his 30-year anniversary letter to my mom, as my mother said, a woman from little town in Texas was fated to come across the sea to the Middle East to meet her husband. It was written in the books and stars, thousands of years ago. So, yeah, I think there was some fate at work there. It was a beautiful thing.
And when did you and your dad start writing this um, piece of work that you keep toying with?
Well, that's another great thing that I would love to mention to visitors, or people visiting the site, or listeners, is it really I wasn't this was I just had read a book called, I think it's called, uh something about water, The Weight of Water, or something, and it's a memoir. um a man writes about his mother, who is biracial, and her experiences, and the strength he saw in her. And so I had read this book in the early 2000s, 2002 or 3, and I was like, "Oh, my dad's really unique, all this, starting this company and coming to America and becoming a citizen and meeting my mom over there." So I had just decided, around that time, that I wanted to write something about his memoir, and we could come up with chapters about his childhood. So that was in 2003 ish. We started it. I'm actually, this was at my dad's place. It's a framed first page of where I wrote, Daddy and Me, a memoir of my Lebanese father and me, from August of 2004. So he loved my little intro to it, and he framed it. And believe it or not, we got most of the chapters done, but it was still unfinished kind of when he passed. But as recent as December of 2023, I just interviewed him, and I put it on YouTube, and I plan to transpire, to type up his, have a transcription of this interview of how he started his company, this handbag company, and then started manufacturing and exporting here. So it was a love project, labor of love, from 2004 to 2024. So for 20 years, I started it in my, uh, you know, early 30s, and it's still unfinished. But I found myself missing him a lot on Sunday. And so I was going back and rereading these childhood stories about making coffee for his mom, and how they raised rabbits in rural, Ruby, Lebanon. And what a joy to have that to look back on, to have in his own words, and even like emails back and forth I printed, that he said, "How is the wording on this?" Or, and he, so yeah, we had like 20 chapters that were 4 to 5 pages each. And I hope I do something with them. If nothing else, they'll be bound in some way to, give to my children, his grandchildren, and preserve his legacy. And Funny enough, I had read the chapter when he was an AFS exchange student, and my family and I have we're plotting a trip out west to start in Salt Lake City, Utah. We booked the flights and then drive through the town where my dad was a senior in high school. And I still have the contact info of his American brothers that he lived with when he was here. They're in their early 80s. And I plan to print that chapter out and bring it. And we're going to try to meet up when I'm in Salt Lake City and before we head to the Grand Canyon and some other stuff we'll do. So a little bit of my summertime and time with my family will be a slight tribute to, honoring my dad and other ways
Yeah.
that he's still alive.
Right. And that's something that I've learned in this, my recent grief educator thing, my grief educator class is that what you had with your mom and then even some with your dad is called anticipatory grief
Yes.
because you knew what was coming. So it was just very, you were anticipating the grief. And now, what you're doing, what's so beautiful about the memoir and the visiting to these places is you're integrating your grief. So you've got integrated grief. And that's where we as grievers need to be moving. We have to be moving forward. Mama always said, things will work out, it'll get better. You just have to keep moving forward. And we just have to keep moving forward and keep integrating our grief. And that's taking them with us. We're integrating what was before with what is now. And that's really so beautiful.
It
And I
is
think it's beautiful what you're
process.
doing to go visit these places. And
Well, as because we're down there, my girls and I, my son has baseball, so he didn't accompany us, but we come down to Texas. My both parents are buried down there, living and staying in the home that was my grandmother's as a way to feel close to them.
smells the
You know,
same. I just
yes,
I love
yes. I
I
mean,
love when you're there. I can't wait until I'm living on the farm, the house, is done. And I can literally be right there and I'll be like, is Allison and Mal are coming over.
yep, yep. We'll have to get her to come down too, just like old times. We'll ride our bikes together. There's
We'll
something
ride the we'll
special
ride the
about.
go-kart and let the chain fall off and push it all the way
Oh my
home.
gosh.
Yeah, folks, we did some crazy stuff. The chain would fall off that little go-kart and we weren't 2 inches. Our bottoms weren't 2 inches off the dirt road. And
So
that go-kart, not golf cart, the go-kart, we would ride that go-kart all through those dirt roads, dust flying, not even looking to see what was coming around the corner. We were terrible. And then that chain would pop off, and we'd be like, oh, and if we couldn't get it back on, we had to push the go kart all the way back home.
yep, that's it. We were on a journey together back then. We're on a journey together now. The go-karts been traded in for, I don't know, some walking shoes so we can walk around the farms. But um it's a journey. This whole thing is a journey. There's days where I will put on my dad's old like sweatshirt and feel his warmth around me and smell the same. I've preserved I'm in my like attic guest room area, in Ziploc bags, some of the smells of what brings me back to him. I don't know how long they'll last.
Yeah.
I'll probably buy some Paco Rabanne cologne because that'll bring me back to what originally brought my parents together. I'm
Yes.
noticing my senses are so heightened to, I guess, maybe again feeling their energy with me, but the smells and the foods. And I feel like when I was reading my grandmother, I also found in one of the boxes, I called her Gaga's, she wrote this grandparent book, and she chronicled stuff about her childhood. And she wrote then about having my mother and what she was like. And she wrote her favorite food when she was like 3 was cinnamon toast, which, if you're not Southern or Texan, you may not know, but it's basically just a piece of bread that you put butter on and sprinkle cinnamon and sugar on, and you pop it in the toaster and it crisps up. And it's so when I feel cravings for cinnamon toast, that's, I think, my mom in me. And when I hear a Buddy Holly song, because my name Allison is from Jerry Allison and the Crickets. That's the same lineage, that Allison family, who was the drummer for Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Jerry Allison, I know that my mom is with me, or she put that song in, or when I hear "You Are My Sunshine" and it just pops into my head, I'm like, that's the song we used to sing when we were little. So they're absolutely like Not in like I think of the movie Ghost, if any of you are old enough to remember with
Oh,
Demi Moore and
Patrick Swayze,
Patrick
hello. I
Swayze.
don't lose any Patrick Swayze moments.
Oh my goodness, right? I loved
Wasn't he
him.
just
Dirty
the
Dancing.
best? And Demi Moore in that, they were just
Ugh,
great. Such a great movie.
it is, right? But we don't need a Whoopi Goldberg to like embody that. If we feel that song, that urge, that smell, I don't know. The senses are the way back into comfort. I go into the, go out in the nature, or I walk in Texas and I smell the smells. I know they're with me. Birds. Anytime I see a dove or a cardinal, I'm like, oh, they're here, and there's been a crow that hangs out recently. A lot
And
of
the
that stuff
Texas,
too, I got from that book, The Signs, and how
yeah.
spirit
And
and
the
energy.
Texas license plates that you see when you're in New York, you send me a
Oh,
picture.
love a good Texas license plates. Like my mom is literally in front of me, right? And my dad. And
Yeah.
I think I told you last week I was really down and I said, Mom and Dad, I miss you. Can I get a tangible sign today? And on the way driving home, I got a license plate in front of me that said uh, DRZ 24/7. And their names were Diane and Robert Zainoon 24/7. And I now interpret that. I don't need a medium to tell them, like, all right, they're here with me 24/7. It just brought me such peace. And I think that's a good thing. Ask for the signs, be open to seeing them, as your book, Hope All the Way is going to be talking about.
Yes.
They're
And
there. We just have to be open.
you do. You really need to open your eyes. And if anything that death has taught me is to be more alive. Like with yoga, which you still do instruction of that and learning. And you reminded me a year ago, you should get back into yoga. And now I do it every single day because I heard this recently. The one thing that keeps us alive is breathing. And that's the one thing that we forget to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're breathing involuntarily, but I mean, breathe. Like Mama used to always say, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. And she knew that that just releases all the yuck of the day, and just take deep breaths and feel the air and look up and see the sky. And, we've only got about 6 minutes left. And I want you to tell everybody this. So I haven't even got to tell you this, but the theme for season five's podcast, my Think Theo podcast, is 2 words. It's don't wait. Don't wait. And that's not to force anybody into doing anything that they are not ready to do. But if you're on the fence about something, don't wait. And I was going to wait on the season 5 podcast. I thought, I've got the book coming out this year. I've got a lot going on. And then I just thought, you know what? Don't wait. So in your life and what you've got going on right now, seeing yourself in about 3 to 5 years and using that theme, don't wait. Where do you see yourself?
It's a great theme. Um, One of my favorite spiritual teachers, Dr. Wayne Dyer, used to say, don't die with your music still inside of you. Um, yeah, no day is promised. So why are we putting off these things that we should celebrate? So, um, did you say in 3 to 5 years, kind of
Yeah.
whatever? Yeah.
Yeah. You can modify it however you want.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to live it. I definitely am in, right, like Ecclesiastes, there's a season for everything. I've kind of been back in this season of noticing lower energy, and I because of the 1 year mark had hit, and all, as you said on your channel, you talk about emotions mirroring the same smells and time of year and nature and the sun setting at the same time. So I'm
And
in a season.
you lost both your parents in the same season,
Right.
almost a year to the day. So that's
Right.
that's hard. You lost your mom and then you lost in March of 23
23. Yep.
and then
And
your
then
dad in
2020.
March of 24. Right? Or was
Yeah.
it April
It
20?
was March. So yeah, 1 month,
Yeah.
1 week shy of the full year. Yeah. So um I was in a so thinking about not waiting and waiting. I'm okay with having pumped the brakes a little on some things in my life. I'm kind of pre-grieving. My son is going to go off to college next year. He's a senior in high
Oh,
school, about to graduate. So these are the seasons of trying to be in the moment. Um, so what am I not waiting on even currently is making sure I'm trying to be as present as possible for those moments that are the transitions in life. I was lucky enough to be right by my dad's side when he passed. I don't wait on texting someone if I think of them, because I want them to know I'm thinking of them. And not everyone wakes up tomorrow morning. I I'm currently living don't wait when I book. I mean, I'm booking a trip. I've been wanting to travel more, and I'm moving towards retirement from almost 30 years of teaching, and booking this trip out west, but not doing it unilaterally, getting input from the family. And they were all like, yeah, we'd like to see the Grand Canyon. We're going to end up in LA. So not waiting on taking the trips because, as my good friend Jen Levesque says, life is short, take the trip, and these are the things, if we get to live a long life, I would hope that we remember on our deathbeds, not the, oh, I wish I'd, graded a couple more essays. You're not talking about things about a job. You're talking
Right.
about the memories you create. So the trips have been happening more, getting down to Texas more. Um, I don't even think I'm waiting until the 3 to 5 years. Yes, I have envisions of what I will hopefully be doing when I retire, but I'm trying to book those things in now, which are trips, coffees with former students, catching up with friends. Um, Not to the point, again, as I said, this season I've been quieter. I haven't been as and really true friends will know, right? If you're just in a season of rest, right? They're still there. They're quietly in the, just checking on you. But um I found a little sidetrack that when I overbook and overplan, sometimes I don't have any space to get in touch with the grief or journal about it. So I do try to not overbook things. So I don't know, live sitting on the beach, reading more, writing more. Um,
Well, I even see in the next 3 to 5 years or whenever that I'll be on my front porch and you'll come down for the summer and be at your Gaga's house and we'll wave to each other because our porches, we can see each other.
yeah,
And we'll be back on season 6 or 7 then. No, by then we'll probably be on season 8. But
today
we just
you'll
have
be like, the listeners will be like, all right, we've heard enough from that Allison.
I know. But this was our catch up time. Sorry, folks. But we just have a few minutes left. I want to thank Allison for being on the Think Theo podcast season 5, since she was the original first guest of season 1. So that's just crazy. And our upcoming guests are, I don't remember their last name at this moment, but they're all very specialized in grief. And I've only met them recently. So we're going to learn a lot about grief if that is where you're wanting to be. So, I
I
just,
will be tuning in for that.
yeah,
I'm on the train. I need to stop into each of the cars to see I'm, like doing things that tend to the grief and not push it away or squelch it or not feel it because we
right.
know it comes up when you don't want it to then.
Exactly. And I'm just thankful that Allison, that you are using your passion and your what you love, your teaching, you're using it in a service of others, which is your purpose. And that's something I've learned recently, and I'm going to say it every season or every episode. When we take our passion and what our meaning is in our life, but we apply it to helping others, that's when it turns into purpose. So I've got a lot of people on this season 5 that are turning their meaning into purpose, and you're one of those people. And I love you so much. We got less than a minute. I'm going to say bye and thank you so much, Allison.
Oh, always the best being on with one of my childhood beautiful friends. I love you so much too. It was a pleasure getting to see your face too on the screening and the Zoom. So we'll talk
I love
soon.
you.
Love
Okay.
you.